Yes, my team is winning. I love sports. I love baseball. Most of all, I love the Buffalo Bills.
You know, Sean, there's only one thing better than baseball played in real life by living, breathing humans. The 1985 classic, NES Baseball, on original NES hardware.
But Joe, I heard that game was haunted.
Haunted? That's just a dumb myth some stupid podcast made up. Come on, our team's winning by 185. Let's get out of here.
I swear to God, Joe, once you put that cursed game into the NES, there's no turning back.
It's just a game.
Oh God, what have you done?
Will you relax? I just need to blow in the cartridge. Trust me, this is worth it just for the pause sound. Just gotta press the power on button and...
Joe? Joe?
It was just a game.
I'm here to see Michael Esposito.
But if they don't win...
It was just an article. No one was supposed to get hurt.
But he did! He did get hurt!
It'll be a shame.
There actually is one way to bring your friend back, but you're not gonna like it. Beat NES Baseball.
That's impossible.
Was impossible. You've acquired special power-ups from surviving the game. Pitcher throws a ball right at you, now it goes right through you.
I'm dead?
You're dead on the inside, but on the outside, not yet, partner.
3 strikes, and they're out of lives.
I can't control my fielders.
No one can.
Is NES Baseball Haunted? The article, the movie, available wherever you listen to podcasts. Coming never.
Who the hell are you?
I'm here to talk to you about the Angels in the Outfield Initiative.
Castlequest. A long time ago, in a faraway land, there lived a lovely young princess named Margarita. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Castlequest. Seems like the whole game is explained here. We don't really need to tell anybody what the game is or what it does or, it's just a castle that goes on a quest throughout the land. The castle literally picks up its physical body and just roams the land of fantasy world, going on a quest to find another castle, right?
Well, that's where you're wrong, Mike.
Well, I was going to say, if that doesn't explain it enough for you, you can always read the back of the box, which tells you all the conflict that's happening in this game, that once upon a time there was a princess named Margarita.
I mean, now, to be fair, I cut the back of the box off because they wanted me. This version of the back of the box wanted me to read the entire thing. But even if I was going to say, okay, well, what's the shortest possible version I can find? That is the shortest possible version I can find because the one in the manual is even longer and basically repeats itself but manages to find additional details to add in. So overall, there is no short side of this story other than you're a guy in a castle trying to find a princess. I think we've heard it before. I don't think we need to include all the atmospheric character names and
There's nothing.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of padding for the actual experience of the game.
That's just the reverse.
Just like this is for the show.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's a whole podcast dedicated to Castlequest, so I figured, we don't have to cover that here. We'll just cover the game, not the story. They are doing a chronological exploration of the story of Castlequest, and they are on episode 1000. Yeah.
What are they called?
Props to
Questalgia?
Yeah, that's something like that. But no, we have to talk about the game, obviously, because that's the point of this podcast. I guess what I was getting at, though, is that Castlequest to me sounds like a fairly generic thing that would actually be exciting, right? Like the idea of seeing Castlequest on a box, if I'm a young kid, that kind of title is going to grab me more than most titles. And so that alone has some intrigue to it, in terms of NES titles. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, definitely. The word
no.
quest, I feel like, gives you more of a maybe the idea that it's going to be a little bit of action.
The genericness of the title kind of made me just think like, oh, I'm not really in for anything exciting, and I know that I have been proven wrong before, but I had no expectations going into this.
So in this game that Sean has no expectations for, you are navigating through a castle. Do we know this guy's name? Did anybody actually read the manual to find out this guy's name?
Bob.
Okay, so you're Bob, and you have to go through the castle, and the whole game takes place inside this one castle with about 100 different rooms inside of it. And as you traverse the castle, it's like a series of puzzle rooms that you have to navigate your way through to collect different colored keys. These colored keys can only open the corresponding color of the door that appears before them. And there are many keys in each room. It's not just, though this is there might not be any key or there might be one key. It's like, no, there are many keys throughout the rooms, and you have to do a lot of backtracking to find ways to collect the other keys. But ultimately, the idea of this game is you enter a room, you try to figure out which key you need to collect or which keys you can collect at the current moment, collect said keys by solving the puzzles, moving into the new doors to go into the other room, and then progressing onwards until you get closer and closer to rescuing Princess Margarita. How does this make for a core gameplay loop?
It's on paper. It's entirely acceptable. We haven't had too many puzzle platformer games, and there's all the room to grow within that genre. So I think that's what I'd say about it.
Even though, like you said, we haven't had a ton of these, it's a little different in the sense that it feels like one full, like, cohesive whole. Not to say that, like, other puzzle games didn't feel cohesive, but what I mean by that is that it's not like you don't go through level after level, that each level is its own self-contained puzzle. It's like the whole castle is one puzzle, and yes, there are self-contained puzzles on each screen, but they sort of correspond to each other. So, like, you're on one screen, you can't figure out what to do. You might have to remember back to a different screen. You might have to look at your map and remember back to another screen where there was a pink key, and like, oh, how can I get that pink key? Well, in order to get that pink key, you got to get this blue key from this other screen, and you got to really think of the castle as a whole like that. And as you go, you kind of like build your map. So like, I appreciated that as something that was like different than, just to use the generic or like the first example of this, different than and now I can't think of the name, Wrecking Crew,
Load Runner
2, but I was thinking Wrecking Crew even, where it was just like the first puzzle game we had, but it was like every puzzle was its own self-contained puzzle. It was nice to see a different way of approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that it all takes place in one castle uninterrupted is kind of like the hook here, right? You mentioned, Joe, building out like the map and just thinking about your whereabouts. This isn't a game, even with 100 levels, where you necessarily get lost. You can get stuck not figuring out how to solve the current puzzle, or being like, oh, maybe I should have used my key on a different door, because there is no like, you must use the key that you just picked up on the door that's directly in front of you. There's choices and stuff. But it doesn't have like a Deadly Towers problem where you have no idea where you are in said castle that feels more like a maze. This is just a massive sprawling castle that you're constantly just uncovering, new doors for.
It's sort of like, I guess, like a modern equivalent, at least structurally, in terms of like each puzzle playing into puzzles nearby. I guess like the modern equivalent could be something like The Witness. I know there's really nothing else similar beyond that, but that was just the first thing that I thought of. But Mike, going to your statement about how you can get stuck, I feel like an alternate title for this game would be just like Soft Lock. Because this is a game, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, that I think it was such a problem being soft locked in this game that they had to create a feature for it with the restart room button on the other controller. So I think that they did a lot of things well structurally in terms of the puzzle layout, but also stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, you really haven't played this game until you've soft-locked yourself, and with 100 levels, you're gonna do it eventually. I actually, at first, thought, like, it was on me. Like, oh, no, like, what did I really just go through the wrong door or whatever? And then I looked it up, and it's just like, no, this is just something that happens to people. So, you know, I'm glad you mentioned The Witness, because I wasn't thinking of, like, that modern of a game, but in many ways, I found this to be, like, an early prototype version of a Prince of Persia style game. You know, Prince of Persia has, like, you're in the, what are you in there? Are you in, like, a temple or, like, a pyramids?
Yeah.
Or,
You're talking about, like, the PlayStation Prince of Persia.
no, I'm talking about the original the computer game one, where, you know, you don't have any real, like, advantages other than your jump and stuff like
Egyptian
that. That's
or
an NES game also,
Mesopotamian or
right? We'll be
something.
playing that, right?
I think we'll be playing a version of that, not the original version,
okay.
but, like, the NES port of it, which probably has some changes.
Gotcha.
Anyway, the reason why I say that, you know, the whole Prince of Persia thing is that it didn't have that problem of, like, potentials to, like, soft lock yourself here. So, I know you thought that it might be a bit early to bring that up, but I think that is an important piece of this whole, like, this game, because ultimately this game is a lot of experimentation in counterproductive ways because of how much control and options they give to the player. On the one hand, the rooms are littered with all different kinds of keys and all different color doors, right? And that gives a lot of player agency on what they should do or what they want to do next. But that can also lead to a lot of moments where you just chose wrong and you have to, you know, like you said, restart the room or, or suicide yourself to kind of get like a cheap way to have a door remain unlocked, but, but not with any penalties. Like, those things are built into the game because they couldn't figure out the, like, let's just open up so many doors and so many keys that, you know, they'll feel like they have a lot of choices, but ultimately we didn't actually test all of these branching paths.
Yeah. That's sort of what I was getting from it is, like, I think a lot of more testing would have solved this problem, and the 50 lives, while that's also a solution to another problem, between the 50 lives and the whole, like, sub-menu, like, that's just entirely dedicated to having to restart, are just sort of lazy solutions for.
I'm of two minds of this too, because when I first played my first playthrough, I soft locked myself, and this was before I had read the manual, so I thought I was actually soft locked, and I was very negative about this game after that point, because then I soft locked again and I restarted again. I had this happen twice before I finally read the manual, which I should have done in the first place, and realized that I could be using, because I tried every button on the. I was like, there must be some menu in the pause menu. I don't know why this isn't just in the pause menu, anyways, but there must be some menu where I can, like, reset or go back, because I didn't think that the idea of resetting a room in a puzzle game like this was that out of the ordinary. In fact, I was looking for it, because I thought that was just like a thing. Where is that not a thing where you, like, you lock yourself? Oh, you got to try again. You reset.
I think
that happens.
Definitely
I think,
a feature in a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, that didn't bother me. Once I found out that exists, it didn't bother me so much because that's part of the experimentation of it all. I never felt like, after that, there's just a mess of options of ways you're not supposed to go, and that's why the soft locking is. It just felt like, and again, I didn't beat this game, so maybe a lot of the places I was going would have turned out to be fruitless and pointless in the end, but I thought everywhere was going to turn out to be somewhere I needed to eventually go, and the whole soft locking part was just like, yeah, not maybe not the most ideal way, but it's like just me exploring and trial and error, like finding things that I would come back to later.
Well, I do think, though, that we've been talking about, like, this submenu being able to restart, sort of solving this problem. But I also do think, and I can't confirm, but I do think that if you proceed through the game in a certain way or certain ways, that you can just run out of keys.
Yes, that is correct.
So that is a real soft lock that they don't have a button for, which is kind of crazy. In a game this long.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm sold now. that sucks. So sorry, I'm just back to exactly where I was before I knew you had that menu, where it's like this game, no game you shouldn't be able to soft lock legitimately in any game.
Well, and it's also the whole useless doors thing. I appreciated your optimism to think that, like, well, it's just so big that maybe I'll figure out what these were for eventually. But the fact that there are useless doors and there are ways to, like, lock yourself out of the game and stuff like that, it just, to me, shows a lack of, like, developer care towards the game, that they are ultimately trying to extend the life of the game by making it so that, oh, well, you went through the wrong door. Like, hopefully next time you'll remember that and figure it out this way. Or, there's a lot of obstacles in this game that are self-created that they could have just play tested. But instead, it's almost like they left them in because they thought that was part of the experience. But I'd argue if it is part of the experience, it's the worst part of the experience.
Yeah, there's no, there's no, get good to getting trapped. There's nothing like, I feel like I've earned this failure. It just feels like you wasted your time.
And that's a good point, because overall, the game isn't really, like, difficult or anything. There's enemies on screen that, kind of act like either Goombas or Koopa Troopers, where they'll either just stay on the same path or they'll pace back and forth. But, they have very programmed sets of movements. They're not going to target you in any particular way. And you do have a knife that, provided you time it correctly, you'll be able to attack enemies with. Something that I understand was not in all versions of Castlequest. So that was like another added bonus for the NES, as like another way to take out enemies. So, even when you go into a new room, the first thing that they give you is the option to explore the room, scroll across left and right at your own leisure to see what the room looks like, to understand maybe what you need to do in that room, rather than have your character walk about and explore it with the peril of enemies and things around it. So it is a forgiving game in some regards. It's just, the trade-off is that when you're playing through the game, you're not sure if you're going to wind up on a path that is ultimately leading you somewhere. There is no progression bar. There are no story beats. I think, this game didn't need, like, boss fights or separate castles, but it did need some kind of moment of, like, I've made it, like, now I collected some other kind of key that I need for the overall, like, bigger picture to rescue the princess, right? It needed something like that, so this way you felt like you were making progress rather than just continuously entering room after room after room.
Yeah, I guess the only sense of progress is that looking at your map and seeing what's filled out. But even that, there would be, like, times where I didn't know, how many layers deep underground rooms could go. So, like, I still couldn't even tell how full my map was, because I was like, well, maybe more things will start opening up over here where I don't think there's any rooms.
Yeah, the sense of progress is literally just the progress that you make. I know that sounds kind of goofy and tautological, but I do think that some dopamine release, it could have been helpful here, because, again, this is a very long game and it is possible to miss the map. So you might have to be writing this all down, and you don't have this thing to look at. So it's very much laborious, is what I would say. Look, this is sort of a job to get through.
Right. It's interesting that they didn't include the map as just, like, part of your starting equipment, right?
Yeah.
Because it is something that it feels like Raphael is filling out. Not that he, not something that, like, it's almost like he found blank paper and a pen instead. It's like, great, now I can fill in the map. If he found an actual map, it should be all filled in.
That's true.
Anyway, I just said his name was Raphael, and that's true. I'm sure that caught some people off guard.
I think it's Bob.
While you were talking, I was like, let me look up this guy's name so I can find out what the hell we're supposed to be calling him. So his name's Raphael, and the reason why I looked up his name is because we're going to be talking about how he controls now. That's kind of an important thing, because, expanding it to the Prince of Persia series, that whole computer game was based on, how far he can jump and knowing the limitations of his move set and what he can grab onto. I feel like that's still important here with Raphael, because if he doesn't have, there's a certain amount of space he can jump to. There's purposefully designed platforms in each stage that after a while you'll get a feel that you just know you can't reach them because you can't jump that high. What did we think about this floaty control that he has in his jump? Was it to their benefit to include something like that to give a little extra gameplay boost to it? Or did it feel kind of zany and out there?
I think it could have been fine for a puzzle game, but because they tried to I don't know, because it was also most of the time, or not most of the time, but a lot of the time, the jump and the motion is also ties into the action, quote unquote, element of it, where you're jumping over an enemy or you have to jump a certain distance around spikes. It just feels like you have to be too precise. There are a lot of times where I would just jump over something and I would miss it by a pixel. Legitimately, I'm okay, I actually don't think I could make it. But then I would try 20 more times and I would make it at the 20th time and I can't even see the difference in what my jump was. And that felt kind of weird because it's it gives you, just for context for anyone who hasn't played the game, it gives you this hang time that's very exact. You literally just sit up there perfectly still in the air for 3 seconds and then start to move down. It sounds like it would be easier to jump over things that way, but it almost makes it harder.
Yeah, it's got this Princess Peach thing going for it, and I found that it's totally viable for the puzzle platforming. The fact that there's sort of just two binary heights that you can be, either on the ground or at this max jump, and in between is this very linear, slow movement, so that it's legible and you'll be able to sort of know how high you can jump. But it does not work for avoiding enemies because it's so slow and it has no hop to it. It's just this linear increasing of height. That when you're trying to jump over an enemy, you need to be super precise because there's so much lead time that you may hit the jump button but for several milliseconds you're still in harm's way. And I know that sounds super short and nitpicky, but it just doesn't feel good, and just becomes a problem for that part of the gameplay.
Well, Sean, that's that becomes a problem because that's how they designed a lot of these enemy encounters, to be in very narrow spaces where there is a wall directly above you. So if you want to jump, right, it just kind of gives you there's either spikes or there's a wall or there's some other element that you need to get to. So you do have to kind of time all these enemy things, and I think that's fine. But yeah, when the jump control input, the timing of it, becomes an issue with the character, which I do know what you're talking about. There was definitely some things even early on that I ran into. When that becomes an issue, it's something that you have to learn around, of pressing earlier than you want to, almost. You have to think about the room and be okay, well, this is a small space and that enemy is heading in the direction that I'm going to be walking towards. So I need to hit the jump as he's approaching me rather than when we're about to collide.
Yeah.
Because you have to prepare for the weight at first that then becomes a levitation trick that then, falls with the same kind of weight.
There's a lot of recalibration in your gamer head from past side scrollers that it's hard to get around.
So let's talk about the types of rooms, and we're not going to talk about every room because there's 100 of them, but I'm just curious about the experience that we all had with the puzzles that we saw, because I would argue that the game at first does do a good job at leading the player to here's the kinds of puzzles you'll run into, and here's the strategy of the game, right? They're immediately introducing you to the different colors and keys. It's not like you're only collecting gold keys right away and there's only gold doors, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, it's blue. No, they're teaching you these things very early on, and they start off with like, here's one enemy, and then here's a enemy that has kind of like a puzzle thing to it because you have to time the enemy with where the key is, and then they show you water. So they space these things all out, and they definitely teach you the elements of the game, which is helpful. But I didn't beat this game either. I found that later on, the puzzles actually became very intricate in a like Adventures of Lolo or other NES puzzle games that we've faced so far, in that kind of same realm where like, oh, it's a similar game where you think it's going to be an easy ride the whole way through, and then it kind of throws this difficulty curve at you. But this one felt fair to me. It just felt like the puzzles just kept getting longer and longer in each room. I was surprised when I started seeing pulley systems with blocks, and you have to like put blocks on the weights and then push another block in an opposite direction to get the gears to spin. Like it was kind of amazing to see these things in this game, even though there's nothing complicated about that. It's just that I didn't expect the puzzles to reach that level of intricacy.
Yeah, that level itself, that one screen can take you like 5 to 10 minutes, and then multiply that by 100. I know that it is one of the more, at least as far as I got, it's one of the most complex. But it varies from like you kind of see what they're doing immediately to I have no idea how to approach this, and I'm hoping that the next room gives me hints. So yeah, it varies wildly the amount of time that you'll have to spend on each of them.
Yeah, I sort of like that, though. I mean, it depends. So earlier, Mike, you said that you saw based on the dead end doors and the getting locked, soft locked, like a lack of care by the developers. And I agree with you on that point. But I also think that these puzzles show a good amount of care in a different way. But I kind of appreciated that there would be something that I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. This is unsolvable. I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And then it would click for me. Like I remember there were a couple where you had to fill in, it was early on, but like you had to fill in spaces with blocks, and you have to fill in spaces with blocks, which is one thing you have to think about. Like that has to dawn on you, first of all, and then second of all, you have to figure out how to get the blocks over to those spaces, and then like once those blocks are filled in, you can use that to push other things, and it's a lot easier to explain if you can see what I'm talking about. But like things like that, where it's like, I do appreciate that type of puzzle that gives you this satisfaction because you couldn't see it before. And not to keep bringing up I know it's kind of ridiculous we keep bringing up The Witness, but like that's the kind of feeling I get from The Witness. And do not get me wrong, this game is nowhere near The Witness, but like it just feels like a tiny little step in that direction for me. And not every puzzle in this game is like that, but I'm just saying I noticed some that were like that.
Right. It's not as unforgiving as Solomon's Key got later on, but that's the other game I was thinking of off the top of my head for NES puzzle games. Key was like, at first they just show you what to do with the game, and you're like, great, okay, like I can play this game, I know what to do, and then the puzzles start to become more intricate to the point where you're like, I don't even know if I can play this because this is a lot to digest at the moment. I think, Joe, you're spot on that, this is definitely some care in these levels, and the fact that there's so many of them and that they aren't just like, okay, defeat all the enemies in the room and then the key will spawn, right? Because it's not that kind of thing. It does take longer to create these kinds of environments and think about how to make a whole new puzzle rather than just, okay, it's the same puzzle as the previous room, but now we added enemies, like they are being pretty intricate about their designs here. I just wonder, they gave you 50 lives because there was no save, okay? In other versions of this game where you can save, they only give you 3 lives. So because the NES, the cartridge, they didn't want to splurge on the same battery that requires you to make it so you can save, whether it was a lack of faith in how much it would sell or that was just too expensive for them, because they use that as a crutch, I wonder if that really hurts this game more than anything, is the length of the game, the inability to save, and knowing that these puzzles are on the longer side. It kind, even though that seems weird to say, something about those things all mixing together hurts the performance of the game, whether it's smartly designed or not, right? You don't want to find out that, the 2,000 piece puzzle that you bought on Amazon that you're assembling, the people from Amazon come up at the end of the day and they say, hey, did you finish it? Because otherwise we're taking it back and we'll give it to you tomorrow. You don't want to find that out. And that's kind of what they did here.
Yeah, that's funny. I think that, it's not even just like do the puzzle again, but it's like the fact that it is the same puzzles over and over that, like, if I did, even if it's something simple that I can memorize, like if I was told that I had to solve 40 crossword puzzles in a row and that I'd have to keep solving the same starting 39 each, it doesn't sound fun to, like, if you don't finish this in one sitting, having to solve the puzzles again. Like, you've already solved the puzzle.
Yeah, once you already know the answers, now it's just work.
Yeah.
Now you just got to do it all again. I feel the same way. I feel like this game is the kind of game where, what does work about it only works as something to, like, solve one puzzle, feel satisfied for a bit, come back to the next time, get stuck, sleep on it, and come back the next day and try again. Like, you can't do that with this. You have to do it all in one sitting. I mean, might as well give you unlimited lives, because who cares? As soon as you shut the NES off, you got to start over anyways. Like, the point of the game doesn't feel like it's to keep your lives and to not die. The point of the game is to solve the puzzles. So yeah, I think it definitely hurts itself by not giving you the chance to, like, come back and save your progress.
Now, we're not cavemen. We have technology. We have emulators. We have the ability to do save states now.
What's an emulator?
Don't worry about that. That's another show. But the ability to do save states, is that actually now, like, is this game, because of time and technological progressions, is this game now better off because you can faux save?
Well, yeah, but I don't think that should be reflected on the judgment of the game, because it is it's kind of cheating. It's a cheat. Like, if a Game Genie made a bad game fun because it's fun to cheat with it, I don't think that makes the game good.
Okay, I like that analogy, because it's like Grand Theft Auto is the same way, right? Like, it's a fun game on its own, and then the cheats are a separate thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, I think if you did want to play with an emulator, you have to make sure you have some good self-control, because if you're just going to rewind or pause or save state anytime you're stuck, like, you're going to also rob the fun of the game, because you've made it impossible to fail. Like, like, I feel like if you're going to do that, then you need to, like, set a rule for yourself that you're just going to, like, save after each solve of a puzzle or something.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that just made me think of someone rewinding in NES Tetris, and I just think that's, like, a really funny thing to be like, I didn't mean to put that block there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are right, Joe. Those things rob the experience. But since we're on the subject of cheating, I found on Game FAQs, and I talked about this briefly at the beginning because Sean was alluding to it, the suicide strategy for Raphael, where it's not the same as a reset or going back into the room. This suicide strategy makes it so that you may want to get a key, but you'll be trapped, or you need to use the different key you have to use the same color key to get out. So you can kill Raphael without leaving. You'll gain the key, which is, not supposed to, obviously the game didn't account for it. And even though you're trading a life for this, now you have the same key that you were supposed to collect. Now you have that in your possession, and you can open up a different door.
Well, that, I would say, is more cheesing than cheating. That is something that is a part of the game, whether it's on the NES or on an emulator. And I guess it's just also a sound strategy, whereas, like, save stating is not an inherent part of the game. So I think that gets a pass. Maybe they overlooked it, maybe they thought about it, but that's a part of the game one way or the other.
Yeah, it gets a pass as far as if you're the player, but it's definitely a dark mark or whatever on the record of the developers, because, like, you should have seen that. And
those lazy motherfuckers.
Or maybe that's just part of their plan, though. We are accepting the idea that Raphael has 50 lives, so he's just essentially being reincarnated. Now, apparently, you get reincarnated with all the possessions you had on you on your body as well, so why not keep the keys?
Yeah, true.
But wouldn't the keys also go back to where they belong? I don't know. It's a paradox. That's for the Back to the Future episode, which we already recorded, so we can't do anything about
We
it.
can go back
To the future.
There you go.
On the sequels and spin-off side, this game, Castlequest, is a sequel to a game called The Castle.
Oh,
So thank you for that, Sean. The castle that's a prequel where the castle hadn't gone on its quest yet. That was just them building the castle. It's a castle builder game.
There's no quest in this, so you just look at a castle this time, and then the quest starts in the second game.
awesome.
Truth be told, it looks like it's exactly the same game as Castle Quest. Like, the character's even just a little bit smaller, if you can believe it, than Raphael is. But it's the same kind of puzzles, same kind of layouts of the different rooms and stuff, except for it looks like, based on a cursory playthrough look, this is on the MSX, so I didn't seek it out, but it looks like there are no color keys in this one. But maybe that's not true, because now I'm starting to jump ahead and colors are being introduced. So maybe
you're just describing what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, but maybe they weren't introduced. Maybe it's more progression like that. I honestly can't tell what's different other than the fact that it just looks worse. So why would you go back to the castle when we have Castle Quest? They also don't have a nice key layout in Castle Quest. Each of the keys is always on screen as its color, and it just puts numbers next to how many of that color you have. In the castle, it just spawns all the colors of the keys in whatever order you collect them in. So you just see blue key, yellow key, yellow key, yellow key, green key.
Huh.
I don't know. I don't like that.
Good job, The Castle.
I wonder what you guys think of this opinion, but I find The Castle to be a more enticing name.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in The Castle than I am Castle Quest. Yeah. It feels like there's going to be something's up with this castle.
Well, something's up with this game, and we're going to have to figure that out on the final segment of the show, the Essential Games List. Sean, your vote.
This is one of the few games that I just was exhausted by. I ended up not really having too much fun at the end of it. I love puzzle games like modern puzzle games and old puzzle games, but this one just didn't have it. It's got too many faults. So no, it's not essential.
Joe.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Sean, on a lot of what you're saying, but I will say that I did have I enjoyed parts of this because I did have those moments of that. It did succeed at times in giving me those moments of this immense satisfaction for solving a puzzle. Some of the puzzles were intricate enough, or at least required my thinking back and backtracking enough that it felt really satisfying when I figured some of them out. So, in that regard, I think it succeeded sometimes. But overall, first of all, the fact that you can get locked out soft locked is pretty unforgivable. A lot of the game does feel like you're going through the boring parts to get to the more interesting parts. And that also combined with the terrible movement in this game, I'm definitely not putting it on the essential games list. And for the record, I think that even without a lot of those flaws, if I just had those parts that I said that I liked, I'd still probably not put it on the essential games list. I just wanted to give it the credit for the things it did right as well. Not essential. Doubly not essential for me.
It's very noble of you.
Yeah.
So to recap the episode, I cut off the back of the box. We started talking about a game where a castle literally picks itself up and goes on a quest. We didn't bother to learn the main character's name. We talked about how the developers didn't care, but they actually did care about the puzzles. And we rushed into the essential games list. So You tell me, listeners, if you think this is going to go on the essential games list. What I guess I'm getting at is that if you're judging by the podcast, you might think we didn't give the game a fair shake here. But I would say that the best things about this game, the things that you might enjoy about this game, aren't things that you would necessarily like say out loud in a sentence. They're, like to Joe's point, to Joe's point about like, there were moments of satisfaction, right? Of like solving puzzles, right? Like that's just something like great. You feel that satisfaction and then it's gone because of the core gameplay loop not being a satisfying experience. So anything that is like nice about this game when you're playing it isn't something that I think you're going to be raving about on a podcast that is now running close to 40 minutes. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, I mean, and another thing that Joe said, like that there were moments of success. I think those are the words you used. Like, like the 7 and 56 and 12 San Jose Sharks of 1993, like they had moments of success, but they were also one of the worst hockey teams of all time.
Well, and that's what I was thinking when I was playing the game. A lot of it, I was like, "This is like what you said."
So yeah, just another way to phrase it.
Well, there's always a chance for another game to be on the essential games list. Next week we have DuckTales, and I've heard good things about that game. I just know it has a really catchy tune on the moon, because everybody knows that's like tune on the moon. I like the sound of that, but the level is just called The Moon, and the song is amazing, and we're definitely going to feature it on next week's episode. But that also means that I have never played DuckTales in my life, so I don't know anything, and that's the whole point of the show, right, guys? We don't know anything about anything.
Right, even after playing.
I am not an expert on any subject whatsoever.
No experience necessary.
Yeah. Right, great.
That's what I always say.
Look it up, everyone.
Also, if you're like, hey, DuckTales is great, but I did play it, so what else you got for me? I've got a game you probably never played. We are doing on our Nostalgia Bites podcast, which is just for Patreon members. You can join at patreon.com/nostalgia. We're doing Antarctic Adventure, a Konami penguin racing platformer game. You want that. You want that in your life, and it never came to the United States, so I am pretty much betting that you haven't played it. But if you played it, that's cool and all. Maybe still listen to the episode and, throw us some bones. Because the bones are our dollars and the worms are our money.